Good evening, you're watching No Spin. I'm Nidhi Razdan. What a tragedy. A 21-year-old student from India, Naveen, was killed by Russian shelling earlier today in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. His roommates told NDTV he had gone out to buy groceries and was waiting in line when the shelling happened, killing him instantly. Just yesterday, Naveen had done a video call with his family back home in Karnataka. The killing prompted the Prime Minister to call another meeting on Ukraine this evening. With many thousands still stranded, there is now criticism from many families, students on the ground and the opposition that the government waited too long to get people out. Now, to be fair, this is a war zone where no rules apply. The government does have all hands on deck in the Ministry of External Affairs who are trying their best to help. But the obstacles on the ground are very real. However, the question is whether the government is also becoming a target of its own rhetoric, where ministers have been talking publicly about saving each and every citizen, even declaring that the Modi government can save them from Mars. We'll be looking at that question in just a moment. But first, just to give you an idea of where Indian nationals currently are as far as Ukraine is concerned. There are about 20,000 Indians in Ukraine, and these are the key cities across which Indian students currently, because most of them are Indian students, more than 18,000 of them, this is where most of them are currently stuck. Now, the Ministry of External Affairs has just had a press conference. The Foreign Secretary, I think, is still briefing the media and has said that 12,000 out of 20,000 people have been successfully evacuated by the government. There are going to be some 26 flights now over the next 3 days to bring more people out. And the Indian Air Force has also been called in to help in evacuating people from neighboring countries. Now, there is, as I said, a big argument that has broken out over whether India did enough and did it early enough. So let's take a look at when the Indian advisories for Indian nationals to leave Ukraine actually came and how this compared with what other countries did. Now, the first Indian advisory that was posted on the Twitter handle of the India in Ukraine site, that came on the 15th of February. And just listen to this language very carefully. It said that Indian nationals in Ukraine, particularly students whose stay is not essential, they may consider leaving temporarily. All right, this was on the 15th of February. The next day, on the 16th, the India in Ukraine, the Indian Embassy handle on Twitter put out an advisory saying that those who want to leave, those who are desirous of traveling back to India, are advised to book the available commercial flights. All right, this was on the 16th of February. On the 18th of February, then it was announced that Air India was going to operate 3 flights on the 22nd, 24th and the 26th of February. And that announcement was made so that students could book their tickets accordingly. So remember, there were no regular flights. The fares were really very high because India still doesn't allow normal air traffic because of COVID. So this is how the Indian advisories played out. Now, if you look at what the UK and the US did, their advisories to their nationals came just a few days before India's. So ours was on the 15th. Theirs was on the 11th of February. The UK advisory, for example, the language is much stronger. It advises British nationals against all travel to Ukraine and to leave immediately. The US advisory on the same day was called a level 4 from the State Department, and it also said that those who are in Ukraine should depart now. That is what their advisory said. So there wasn't really much of a difference in terms of the number of days, but certainly the tone and tenor of the advisories was different. And incidentally, it wasn't just the US and the UK. Around the 11th of February, you had Japan, Israel, Norway, South Korea, all of them who had advised their citizens to leave the country. So this is how those advisories played out on the ground. Well, I'd like to go across to Anna Piatetska, who is with the Voice of America and joining us from Lviv for the very latest on the ground. Anna, tell us what's happening where you are.
Hello. I'm now in the west part of Ukraine, so here is more or less safe. I mean, we do have sirens, alarms regarding the strikes nearby, but for now it's fine.
What information do you have at all on Indian citizens and students in particular who are stranded there and have been, making SOS appeals for help?
Well, I don't really have numbers, but as far as I know, there are a lot of evacuations going on. Different countries, different organizations are doing this. As far as I know, evacuations are happening without any, well, I mean, I cannot say without any problems, but there are no obstacles. Obviously, there is a war and there are measures to be taken, but evacuations are happening. So I think that foreigners are more or less on the safe side.
And quick last question, any information at all on the Russian advance towards Kyiv that you're getting there?
Well, Kyiv is not surrounded, so there are a lot of forces, Russian forces nearby, and some little towns are completely destroyed by airstrikes. They're trying to advance for the 5th day now. Well, for the fourth day, it's like the main goal is to get into Kyiv. Our armed forces are fighting back as much as they can, and our territorial protection as well, the civilians. So for the moment, Kyiv is not surrounded. Kyiv is fighting back. There are a lot of airstrikes, unfortunately, happening in the Kyiv center as well. Just 20 minutes ago, Russians struck the television tower. And there are now some problems with TV channels, but well, Kyiv is fighting back. So for the moment, this is what I can tell you.
All right, Anna, thanks very much for joining us and giving us that update. I wish you the best and hope that you're able to stay safe in this crisis. Thank you for speaking to us. The question we're asking is whether India did enough to bring its nationals back. Is it doing the best that it can in a very bad situation? Joining us tonight, we have Priyanka Chaturvedi, Member of Parliament of the Shiv Sena with us, General Hasnain, who has served in the army and is now writing on strategic affairs. We also have Ambassador K.C. Singh with us, a retired diplomat and also an expert on strategic affairs and India's foreign policy, of course. Priyanka Chaturvedi, to you first, because you're here today because you were tweeting extensively on the difficulties that Indian students were facing while trying to cross into Poland, and we're actually seeing that repeated, across many different cities in Ukraine today. Frustrated students. Tell us more about the SOS messages that you've also been receiving from them.
So ever since the first advisory was put out on the 15th of Feb, there's a lot of confusion amongst the students as to how they will return back, because there were limited flight options, the tickets were getting expensive. And I had at that point in time suggested and sent a request letter to the External Affairs Minister as well as the Civil Aviation Minister that perhaps we need to have an evacuation strategy in place and need to have more aircrafts going there to pick them up. So anyway, that is something that is where we missed the bus clearly, and we are having to handle all the challenges right now. So SOS calls are plenty with regards to food, with regards to water, with regards to shelter, with regards to the biting cold that they are having to face because they are standing at the borders. So that has been my concern. My concern has been that Indian students, they need their voices amplified, and the best we can do through our social media handles or through whatever we can reach out to our External Affairs Ministry to be able to direct them or suggest to them that this is where help can be given. Unfortunate that a few things got escalated yesterday, but I will continue to speak up for the students and ensure that everyone is back home safely. Unfortunate death also happened today, but I just hope it's the first and the last tragic death that we hear of.
Ambassador K.C. Singh, you've had extensive experience on this, and the Ministry of External Affairs has an amazing record in evacuating Indian citizens. I mean, we were reminding people yesterday that India's done this before. It's done it quietly. When the Gulf War happened back in 1990, nearly 2 lakh people were evacuated in what was actually the biggest evacuation by a civil airliner, which was Air India. Today, do you think that they are just caught in a situation which is really out of their control. It's a war at the end of the day. Are they doing their best, or are they caught up in a bit of their own rhetoric because of their political leadership?
Needed multiple problems. First one is we had 9 days from the first advisory to the first shot, which was fired on the 24th. Now, in those 9 days, we should have augmented the mission in Kyiv. Because what was required was, considering there are almost 20,000 students, you needed to get in touch with them. You needed to talk to their universities. Many of them, as it turns out now, couldn't leave because they're finally our students. Universities told them they lose out if they leave. Naturally, universities wanted to hang on. But overall, I think both the Ukrainians, as well as the students, indeed us or the international community, other than the Americans, were convinced that it's going to be mainly an attack in the east. It's not going to be an all-out attack coming from Belarus, coming from the south, from Crimea, coming from not so much from the east, but multiple points from the north, from Russia as well as Belarus. What has got complicated is that as the attack has gone on, the Russians met more than expected resistance. And so their first onslaught ground to a halt. Now, there are two ways to respond to that. Either Mr. Putin should have realized the cost is going to be very high, both for the civilians there, Ukraine, as well as for his own army, or he just, gets down to it and say, let's double it. And which is what he has done.
Ambassador Singh, sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you, do you think that the way the Indian advisories were initially worded were a bit, shall we say, there wasn't a sense of urgency that was conveyed about leaving, because it says, may consider leaving. Indian nationals may consider leaving, whereas you had the advisories of other countries 4 or 5 days before that, which clearly said, get out. You need to leave now.
No, obviously, and I suspect part of it was a misreading of the situation. You never thought it's going to go bad so fast. And the other one is maybe you didn't want to offend Russia. Because, if you started joining, look at the votes, Indian votes after that. Now, if you don't want to offend the Russians, then you don't want to do what the West are saying. So you didn't want to didn't want to join this clamor that the Russians are about to invade Ukraine. Now, so you fell between two stools. You wanted people out. You didn't want to upset the Russians. You were not fully convinced the Russians are coming in. And then by the time it started, there was very little time left.
So let me get...
just too many.
Right.
There are too many of them, and they're scattered all over the country, and it's a huge country.
General Hassan, did we misread the situation and the urgency of it?
See, Nidhi, I'm not going to give you a black and white answer on that. So let me analyze it also in the similar way. I don't agree with your initial statements which you have made. There is a thing called fog of war. You've heard of fog of war? The fog of war does not start when the war starts. The fog of war is there much before there. It's a question of reading the situation, and it's all a question of transparency. That's what intelligence is based upon. If you start comparing the first Gulf War, the Americans, everything was virtually transparent. Everyone knew that the Americans are going to go in. Saddam Hussein is not agreeing to it, and therefore the evacuation has started much earlier. Let's not compare apples and oranges out here. There's something completely different. Regarding the advisories put out by the UK and US and Norway and all, who are the people they were putting their advisories to? They are people of an upper strata of society, people who can reckon things. Here you are talking about young students who've probably taken loans, who have borrowed money here and there, and they are the ones who are pursuing these studies. They will think 10 times before they will start taking any kind of an advisory seriously. But coming back lastly to the issue whether it is fair to start blaming people out here, I think you got to remember that I've got 40 years of military service behind me. And I admitted the other day when I wrote in an article, I went wrong in my assessment. There are miscalculations which have taken place everywhere. From the NATO side, from the United States, from Russia, from Ukraine, everyone has been miscalculating.
Right.
So at the end of the day, to say that at the end of the day that the government of India miscalculated, and it's because of that today we are suffering this situation, I think is an unfair one.
Okay, I just want to break in for a moment because the government of India has just announced that the Indian embassy in Kyiv is shutting down. They have said that there are no Indians now stranded in Kyiv. That is what Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla has just told the media. And the Indian embassy there has shut down. It is possibly going to be relocated to a part of western Ukraine and moved there. Remaining Indian embassy officials are presently on the road to western Ukraine. They have left Kyiv. They are on their way to western Ukraine. And of course, government officials stressing that every attempt is being made to protect Indian lives there. Priyanka Chaturvedi, quick reaction to this from all of you. Actually, Priyanka, to you first.
No, I think that's the only, I would say, wisest thing to do right now at this point in time, but also continue to ensure that those who are still stranded in the eastern part of Ukraine find a safe passage to reach the western borders, because that is where the biggest panic right now has arisen after the death of a student. So I think this is what is needed, slightly more proactive. The press conference has also said that they have 26 aircrafts on standby, and Indian Air Force would also be sending its aircraft for rescue operations. So I'm hoping that we can close this entire mission of bringing back Indians sooner rather than later.
Ambassador K.C. Singh, your thoughts on this development?
No, it's sensible, because if the Russians have said all civilians should evacuate, it means they are going to have saturation bombing there, and they'll treat anybody there as enemy. And if you're non-functional, you are in a bunker. That's not the role of the embassy. It's better to relocate them from where they can continue to function. And second thing is, all this about planes going and planes being sent, they're not even the vital part of the whole thing. Planes will go once people are out of Ukraine. They can't go to Ukraine.
Exactly.
The problem at the moment is within Ukraine. How do you get the people there?
Yeah,
I think
so
it's not...
in fact, yeah, absolutely.
One point, just Nidhi, one point. It's not even, everybody says go east. Listen, there are some countries in the south also. There's Moldova, there's Romania. I think somebody has not sat down and said, okay, people in Kharkiv, we think this route is open to this country. They're giving bland things, and that's why a student at a railway station, when the advisory came in the morning, leave Kyiv, he said, we are sitting at the railway station since yesterday. So what do you mean leave Kyiv? Go where?
That's exactly what they want to do.
So
that's exactly what they want to do.
Advisories alone are not enough.
Absolutely. General Hasnain, quick last comment. One of the things one was commenting on was, the question of whether the government's got caught a little bit in its own rhetoric. Of course, it's important for the government to give people hope and to lead from the front. But, has this become a bit of a photo op as well? Ministers are now doing the same thing. They're going into planes where these students are coming back. They have the mobile phone in their hand. They're saying, Modi ji, brought you back. Wonderful, please. All the rest of it. Perhaps if we just let the MEA do its job rather than having to send central ministers out there, because frankly the embassy will be tied up half the time dealing with these VIP visits rather than focusing on the evacuation efforts.
Firstly, I'm totally for what the decision which has been taken by the government of India in closing down the embassy. It makes a lot of sense, because Kyiv is going to come under attack anytime. Kyiv is the center of gravity, political, psychological, military, everything. So obviously supply chains are going to break down everything, and Kyiv is not possible to survive in Kyiv. So that's a very good decision. As to your main question on this issue of the rhetoric, see, Nidhi, we are all living in the information age, right? What do I do? If I write an article in the morning, I like to publicize it and send it out here and there, put it on tweets and things like that. It's a very natural thing with today's technologies to keep doing this. So I'm not sure whether this is rhetoric. Yes, the MEA has been doing a fine job in doing all this, but if there are ministers involved in it, it is a natural thing to us that their followers and things like that will keep putting out these kind of images here and there. We got to tolerate this, and you got to live with this in the information age as we go along.
Well, I mean, one could question whether silence and just doing your work quietly might also be an effective way in this information age, just putting facts out there rather than, making this a big chest-thumping exercise. But, that's a debate for another day. There's a lot that's happening at this hour. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us for this conversation. I also had the chance to speak with Britain's High Commissioner to India, Alex Ellis, on the situation earlier today. High Commissioner, it's day 6 of the Russian invasion. We're seeing a clear shift in the Russian strategy in terms of a more aggressive approach to targeting civilians. We have an Indian student who has died in Kharkiv today. How does the UK see the situation at the moment?
This is an unprovoked invasion with mass force by an autocracy on its smaller democratic neighbour, blowing a hole straight through the fundamental principles of the UN Charter. That is what it is, an invasion. It is having terrible consequences on human life, on displacement of people. We had the tragedy of the Indian student who was killed today. We can see the increase in military force by the Russians, and that will lead to far greater loss of human life, as well as displacement of lakhs, if not crores, of people inside Ukraine and across into other borders as well.
Is your assessment then that things are actually getting much, much worse?
Things are awful already, and they are getting worse because of the greater use of Russian force, and that's a consequence of some very fine defensive action by the Ukrainian armed forces and the Ukrainian people. And this is going to just deteriorate in ways which are unimaginable. I'd never imagined we would see a land invasion of another country in Europe, but that is what is happening today. And that's why the UK government and its allies and partners are responding as we are, whether it's with sanctions, whether it's military support, always trying diplomacy as well, but at the moment there doesn't look much opportunity for that.
Right, but a series of sanctions have also been announced by the West, High Commissioner, and a spokesperson for Boris Johnson, in fact, told reporters that these are designed to topple Vladimir Putin. So does this mean that the West is seeking a regime change in Russia?
The aim is to stop this mad military adventurism of invading another country. That's why we have the broad sanctions we do, whether that's on individuals, whether that's on Russia's biggest banks, whether that's stopping Russia from being able to raise money in the UK, the biggest financial centre in Europe, whether it's banning Aeroflot. These are all ways in which we want to deter President Putin, but also send a signal around the world that autocratic military adventurism cannot succeed in this century.
How will these sanctions, however, play out on the ground? Because even if they hurt Russian people, is that really going to be enough to get Putin to back off? Does he care what even his people think?
We have to use what we can in order to deter this behaviour, both now and in the future. And that is the aim. And I think we have to be in it for the long haul. We have to do it together, and we have to be patient, and we have to be determined. There are other elements as well besides the sanctions. We have to take more defensive positions in protecting NATO's eastern flank. We have also been providing for years, actually 7 years, training to Ukrainian military as well. So there's a whole range of measures which we've deployed. The immediate militarism, if President Putin, it seems, is determined to attack and destroy his neighbour, there's only so much we can do about that, but we have to keep plugging away. It's a long game.
Finally, High Commissioner, your view on India's stand, which has abstained on key votes at the UN so far. Would the UK like to see India take a firmer position against Russia?
First thing I should do is express my condolences for the loss of life of the Indian students. It's a terrible, terrible and avoidable tragedy. It's caused by invasion. I really welcome what the Indian ambassador to the UN said last Friday when he talked about the importance of the UN Charter, territorial integrity and respect for sovereignty in Ukraine, international law. We welcome the announcement by the Indian government of humanitarian aid going to Ukraine. Thirdly, I really understand the focus at the moment on getting Indian students, thousands of Indian students, out of Ukraine. Now we need to look ahead. In what ways can we make President Putin and the people around him understand that just invading another country is an unacceptable way to behave? You do that with as many countries as possible. I think it's relevant not just in the case of Ukraine, but also looking around the world. The world is turning more towards the Indo-Pacific for very good reasons. The United Kingdom is determined to continue to do so. But we have to send a clear signal to autocracies that military intervention is not the right answer.
High Commissioner, thank you very much for speaking to NDTV on this crucial story tonight, and we leave it there for the moment. Much more on the big breaking story of India closing down its embassy in Kyiv and deciding to shift it to western Ukraine. India saying that no more Indians are now left in Kyiv, and they're going to focus on getting Indians out of Kharkiv. That is the city in which the student Naveen lost his life earlier today in Russian shelling. Thanks very much for joining us. Goodbye.